32. Genesis chapter 32. We're going to go back just a little, not much. We're going to drop back to verse number 24 because we had just started talking about this. In verses 24 through 32, Jacob wrestles, has a wrestling match with an angel. In chapter 34, Jacob, verse 24, of Genesis 32, then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Suddenly a person he describes as a man wrestles with Jacob, I don't know how long, until daybreak. I imagine they were worn out, or Jacob was. Verse 24 says he's a man. When you get to verse 28, it says he is God. You determine that for your own self, but I will say this. Hosea chapter 12, verse 3 and 4. Hosea chapter 12, verse 3 and 4 adds a little to this. Hosea 12, verse 3 and 4 says, in the womb he's talking about Jacob, he took his brother by the heel, and in his maturity, as a grown man like now, he contended with God. Yes, he wrestled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. So I would say, this is just me. Don't take this as God's word. It's the old Timbo. At least he's wrestling with an angel. If the angel... Because I say that because the angel had the power to disable him, and he does. And sometimes he spoke as God and even acknowledged as God, but he looked like a man. I'm going to stick with it's an angel, but I don't know. It may have been something else that we're not knowledgeable of. Don't look at me like that. So Jacob is left alone to wrestle with this angel. He's going to wrestle with him until morning. He is alone with God in this struggle. Jacob's life so far, if you think about Jacob's life, he's been in struggles all his life. Myself, I'm not sure what is happening. If it's physically that this is going on, or he's in his sleep, but I know one thing: he was hurt physically. His socket in his hip was blown out. So in verse 25, when he saw he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh, or his hip socket. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while wrestling with him. That's verse 25. So we see the angel, he could not defeat Jacob. Either he didn't want to, or physically he couldn't. So his physical strength wasn't any more than Jacob. It doesn't appear to be. But this angel had the ability to just touch him, and he dislocated his hip. But Jacob holds on to him. He won't turn loose. He's holding on for dear life, I guess. He's holding on and won't let him go. And when the angel saw he could not win, if the angel saw that Jacob would humble himself, and he humbled himself by knocking his hip out of socket to wrestle. And if it's an angel, I always think that he too had to humble himself to have the strength of a person. I don't know any of this. I'll tell you that. I have my own opinions, but I'm leaving them out. And Jacob was able to hold on. That's the main thing. And not let go of this angel. And when the angel saw that he could not win, he couldn't win the wrestling match, even on using the same strength as Jacob, then he dislocated his hip by touch. Apparently, he had this injury for the rest of his life. he limped for the rest of his life. And I think that it was done that way because he could remember why he had that hip out of socket. And I will say this, Jacob was a strong guy. Jacob, remember the stone at the well where Rachel and all of them were waiting for the other shepherds to come so they could move the stone from the covering the well. Well, Jacob just jumps right in there and moves the stone from the well. That's in Genesis 29 and verse 10, if you're interested in going back and looking at that again. Verse 26, then he said, let me go, the angel, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So as time passed, both men must be exhausted, as Jacob sure is, and not sure what daytime has anything to do with this. I don't know why that's important. Maybe you do, and if you do, I'd like to hear it myself. Why that would be important that he let gone before the sun comes up. I don't have any idea. But I know this. This wrestling match has turned into a verbal contest. It's become a verbal contest. And it's so interesting to me because in verse 27, he said to him, what is your name? Well, the angel knows his name. But he's going to make a point. And Jacob said, my name is Jacob. The angel knew this. But the angel also knows something else. He's going to make a point with him. God knows. He knows all about his character and all about him. And Jacob's name expressed his character. Jacob's name told us what he was like. You remember what Jacob means? Supplanter. Jacob, remember when he was born, but he was the second twin born, and he had a hold of Jacob's Esau's heel, and they struggled in her womb, and when they come out, he's got a hold of his heel. So he also takes his place. He gets the blessing, and he gets the birthright. He gets the birthright and the blessing that Esau was eligible for, but Esau didn't have the heart and was not favorable in God's sight because he just didn't have character. And so, by hook and crook, his mother helped him, and they tricked Isaac into thinking that he was Esau. And so he gets the blessing and he gets the birthright. And so he's a supplanter. And that's what his name means. In fact, that's what his character was. He supplanted his brother Esau by deceit. His name is going to be changed forever. God's going to wipe that out. He's going to give him a different name that he'll always remember, that everyone in history remembers, even us. His name is about to be changed forever, and it's going to reflect that Jacob's reliance is not on himself, but on who? On God from now on. And so in verse 28, he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Here we have a strong hint here of what's going on. Jacob's life has always been one of conflict. It means supplanter. He deceived. After he was born, Jacob and Esau struggled in the womb. All of that kind of stuff. And now, in verse 29, then Jacob asked him and said, please tell, by the way, this is where we left off. Verse 29, then Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him there. Now I want to refresh your memory. Go back one verse. He calls him Israel. What did Israel become? It became a nation, didn't it? And it became the nation of Israel. And it came from those 12 sons of Jacob, whose name is now Israel. Everybody with me? So it was to be. It was to be. And so Jacob asked the angel, "What is your name?" But the angel doesn't tell him. There's a similar incident in Judges chapter 13, verse 17 and 18. But I'm not sure that he would even say his name. I don't know why, but Jacob is the one that received a blessing, and we do not know what that blessing was, other than he's going to be his descendants like the sand of the sea that he always had. In verse 30. Now, if I say something that you disagree with, you need to jump in there, straighten me out. Verse 30. So Jacob named the place Peniel, or Peniel, however you want to say it, for he said, "I have seen the face of God, yet my life has been preserved." It's spelled differently in the next verse, but it's the same. Peniel, or that's how I pronounce it. It may be Peniel, but here's what it means. That's what I do know. It means the face of God. And Jacob knows it, that it was not an ordinary man that he wrestled with. God is a spirit, and no one has seen his face. How do we know that no one has seen his face, the face of God? Because you didn't live if you saw his face. So Moses asked if he could see him. I want you to look at that. I think that's so interesting. Exodus 33, beginning at verse 18. Exodus 33, beginning at verse 20. Let's look at verse 18. Moses is going to ask God. In Exodus 33, beginning at verse 18. Then Moses said, "I pray you, show me your glory." And he said, "I myself will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim the name of the Lord before you, and I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show compassion on whom I will show compassion." Verse 20. But he said, "You cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live." Verse 21. Then the Lord said, "But there is a place by me, and you shall stand there on the rock. And it will come about while my glory is passing by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock." Remember that? Cleft of the rock. And cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Verse 23. Then I will take my hand away, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. I don't know about you, but mine is, I was in that cleft of the rock, but can't tell you what I saw, but he can. So Jacob, yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, just to be in God's presence.
Because the children of Israel feared
Mm-hmm.
feared that situation so
Yeah.
much that
Yeah.
they told Moses, you speak to God, don't let God take us, or we will die.
Yeah.
They will be, so they feared, he came back.
Yeah. Yeah. Something. Yeah.
into his house.
Yeah. His glory. Yeah. You remember also when they're in the wilderness and attend a meeting, he would go in and he would meet God and they would talk and he's given directions. And when he'd leave the tent of meeting, then they made him put a veil on his face because his face was so glowing. Yeah. That's interesting. Thank you. Makes you... Yeah, it does. So in Jacob's case, he saw the manifestation of God. He saw this guy wrestling with him. I don't know if it was an angel or a man or a manifestation of however God wanted to do it. That's God's business. It's not mine to guess. And so if you think about it, the patriarchs, by God's grace, they experienced all kinds of manifestations of God. They did. And they were able to go on living as Jacob did in this case because they didn't see God face to face. Verse 31. Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over the Penuel, and it's the same word as that other word, just spelled different, and he was limping on his thigh. So you see, he's carrying that with him. I think he had it all his life as a reminder. He sent his family over there first with everything, all their belongings, and he stayed here by himself when he met the angel. And so most likely this injury lasted him all his life. I don't know that. I mean, maybe he found him a doctor that'd knock it back in place. I have no idea. Jacob, here's what I do know. Jacob reached this great turning point in his life. Think about how his life changed after this. To me, it's a turning point in his life. He now allows God to lead him more than he'd ever done before. And God is going to now be in his life, and it allows God to take charge in his life, and Jacob's able to prevail. He would always serve God, and to me this will always mark him as a reminder that he is not self-sufficient. And that's what we get to thinking about sometimes. Sometimes we forget. We think we're in charge of everything, and I did it, and that's wrong. And we're to have a humble attitude, and we're to be self-denial of ourselves. That's what God wants us to do. And he realized he's not self-sufficient. Verse 32. Therefore, to this day, the sons of Israel, this is what is so interesting to me. The sons of Israel do not eat the sinew or the tendon and the muscle of the hip. To this day, they don't eat anything that has to do with the muscle of the hip. It changed their eating habits forever. Just because of this event, that he met that angel and wrestled with the angel, or a manifestation of God, and it will always be memorialized by the children of Israel. And Jacob's blessing from God, the children of Israel will never eat the particular tendon from the thigh ever again. This is so interesting to me. I'll tell you, any comments about that as we go on? Well, guess what? We're in chapter 33. Chapter 33. So Jacob has wrestled with the angel. His name has been changed to Israel. He probably limps. And now he's a changed man. God has changed his character and everything about him. And now he's fully dependent upon God, like he should have been from the start. But sometimes we're the same way. We get a little stubborn. We think we're in charge, and we have to be brought down sometime and humbled. And I guess the best time that happens is when we're sick and we realize we're not in charge of everything. Verse 1. In the first 16 verses here, we're fixing to see Jacob, or Israel, has always been worried about, and that's meeting Esau. He hadn't seen Esau in 20 years. And he ran away from Esau because Esau wanted to kill him because he got the blessing and the inheritance as the firstborn. And so now in the first 16 verses, it's about Jacob meeting Esau. Verse 1. Then Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau is coming, and 400 men with him. You can imagine, don't you know, the look on his face when he saw that. So he doesn't trust him yet. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two handmaids. Now, I want you to watch it. This is really interesting to me. Maybe I'm reading into it. I don't know. Jacob begins preparations by meeting Esau. He sees him coming with 400 people. He's not sure exactly what's on his mind. So Esau doesn't know what to expect either, I don't think. It's been 20 years. So here's what Jacob does. Jacob divides his family like he did the animals. And this he made into 4 groups out of his family. 4 groups. And that's what's interesting. He makes the 4 groups out of the 2 handmaids, the 2 wives. I almost want to use a joke here, but I'm not going to. I was going to say a partridge in a pear tree, but that's not right. He divides them into those 4 groups. And watch what he does in verse 2. He puts the maids, the handmaids, and their children in front, and Leah and her children next. And who's the last group? Rachel and Joseph is last. Joseph is Rachel's child who's going to be put in a pit and going to be sold off by his other brothers, and he goes to Egypt, and we'll see that. So we see in how he arranges each group. The first 2 groups are the handmaids and their children. The third group is Leah and her children. And the last group, now it just may be my own weak mind, the last group is Rachel and her son Joseph, because Benjamin has not been born yet. When Benjamin is born, what happens to Rachel? She dies. So Benjamin hadn't been born yet. So it makes you wonder if he's lining them up on what they mean to him. I don't know, but yes, sir.
He loved Rachel.
Yeah, he loved Rachel.
He didn't love Leah like he did Rachel.
No, or the handmaids, yeah. Yeah. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Served 7 years for her, and then when he had to take Leah first, he had to serve 7 more, that's 14, and then he worked an additional 6 years for a total of 20 years to get all those kids he had from these handmaids and from Leah and from Rachel. And now he's gone with them. Verse 3, but he himself passed on ahead of them and bowed down to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Now we can picture this in our mind. He goes on ahead of everybody. If Esau's going to take vengeance, it's only going to be on me, hopefully. And in doing so, he bows to the ground 7 times. Now, I don't know how you feel about this, but the number 7 was a special number to them, to the Hebrews. What it indicated, and I guess it still does today, it indicates perfection, it indicates completion, and And I'll tell you what it represents here. It represents high respect, doesn't it? High respect. And also that 7 is thrown in there for a reason. Perfection, completion. And so verse 4.
Another candlestick.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember the name of it, but it's got 7 branches, 3
Yes,
on
it-
each side and 1 in the middle.
Yeah.
You see that everywhere.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
7.
Yes, you do. Thank you for that. I forgot what you call that too. What do you call that? Menorah, that's it. Thank you. Verse 4. Then Esau, look what he does. He ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Didn't you see that in your own mind? Man, it's unfolding to me. I see the dust running everywhere, and here they come. They come together, and Esau, that had to be a relief to Jacob. Boy, if you were Jacob, man, you are relieved, because here comes Esau. It's just an amazing event that takes place. And what we see is forgiveness. And what we see is love. 20 years they've been separated with hate and fear. And now the hate is gone. Esau's put it past him. And we see this picture, a great picture of forgiveness and love. And it reminds, I tell you what it reminds us of. It reminds us, or me, of the prodigal son. In Luke chapter 15, it reminds you of the prodigal son. He when he comes back, he said, look, I don't deserve anything. He's talking to himself. He says, I'm going to tell my father just to make me one of the hired men, and I'll work for him. After he's taken everything that he was supposed to have and just spend it all on nothing. And so you see that, and then the other son gets mad, and the prodigal son, and he told his son, he said, look, you've always been with me, and everything I have is yours. But now your brother's come home. He was lost and he's found. So we're able to see this there too. We don't know whether 20 years of absence of Esau forgave him and forgot him, or Jacob making the first move of reconciliation. I don't know, but I imagine that first move helped both sides, and it turned his heart. Esau's heart was turned, and we remember Rebekah's words came true in chapter 27, 43 through 45. Then Jacob leaves his home. Enough time has passed, and she said, I want you to go to my brother, and I want you to stay a few days, and I'll come and I'll send word to send you home. But that never happened. 20 years went by. And so Esau's anger has apparently gone by too after 20 years. They put it on past him, I guess. Verse 5. Now listen, stop me if you want to say something, because you know more than I do. Verse 5. He lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children, and said, who are these with you? Esau's asking him, who are all these people? Who are all these with you? So he said, Jacob did, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. Esau now sees Jacob's family, and he says just exactly what we would say. Who are all these with you? You know, how many times have you been to a family member you hadn't seen in a long time, and here's their kids, and you go, my goodness, who are you? Are you kidding me? I haven't seen you since, or I've never seen you. Just like us. There's not a dime's worth of difference between these people and you and I today. My dad always said the only difference between people is the mode of transportation. I'm not sure he's exactly right. There's computers and all that stuff. But the heart of man hasn't never changed. Always the same. And so they passed before Jacob. And Jacob gives credit for God's blessing, why he has what he has. And he shows us that Jacob's character and his outlook has changed. We see that change in him. And we learn from this example today that children are a blessing from God right here. And all blessings come from Almighty God. We didn't do it. We think we did. And he deserves all the credit. All we have, yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. 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 It's all worked out. It hadn't it. Thank you. That's a good example. I don't know. We see his change of outlook. We also see and we learn an example today. I think Doran has always pointed out that even in sunshine and rain, Matthew 5 and verse 45, verse 6 and 7, and then I'm going to quit. Then the maids came near with their children, and they bowed down. Didn't you see that all happening? And Leah likewise came near with her children, and they bowed down. And afterward Joseph came near with Rachel, and they bowed down. So each group presented themselves to Esau, and they bowed down, and the bowing indicates a deep respect, and they were all paying respect to their brother Esau. All of these events we see in our mind, and I don't know about you, all this makes me feel good. I like this. It all makes you feel good. Any final comments? We will be in verse number 8 when we come back to Genesis 33 next time. Genesis 33, verse 8.